Hold your nose, folks. It's the Big Flush. My name's Zach Marintet, and I'm here with my friend John Enoch. John, how you doing today?
I am duper super duper 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 duper. How's that for an answer?
That is a little excessive, but, as William Blake said, the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom.
Is that what he said?
And that's where we're on our way to today, hopefully. Haphazardly.
Haphazardly, indeed.
We've had a really rough week. I mean, it's always rough in terms of politics, but we also have other forms of rough in the forms of natural disasters, boats blowing up with only the innocent people suffering as a result. We have a lot of stuff going on with guns. We've got a lot of stuff going on in your home state of Michigan, as always. Such a troublesome state, John.
Well, I know. The Midwesterners, they're full of piss and vinegar and...
The flyover states. But Michigan is a unique flyover state insofar as it's a swing state, as far as I understand, as a Canadian.
Well, I hear there's a lot of swingers in the States.
Oh, well, that's what I like.
Yeah. Ooh.
I got to check it out. Especially those corporate businessmen who are in their late 60s and, out for action. And
I know.
Out in Bloomfield Hills and Grosse Pointe.
Yes.
We also have a friend of ours from... Is she from Grosse Pointe, or does she just live there? Ms. Williamson.
I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know if she... she said she lived there, so obviously I believe she did. I don't know her background or where she's from. She may very well be.
She's the writer.
Yeah, she's the writer.
Right, and she's said some interesting things lately. So today we got to go over, a few things that have happened this week. The Conception, the scuba tour boat that, not mysteriously, it's not a mystery. There's going to be scientific explanations as to how that fire happened so quickly. But we're not really sure why only the crew members got off. It was a captain and 4 crew members who survived. And the 34 people who were on this tour died, many of them young. And the cause of death is breathtakingly disturbing.
Yeah.
Burning to death.
Yeah, that's no fun.
We've got a lot to talk about Hurricane Dorian, which has been skirting its way around the east coast of Florida. Your brother lives
he lives
in that area and has
right
been at
down
risk.
there. He lives just above Jupiter, Florida, in a town called Stewart.
And has it been touched?
No. They were originally supposed to be, in the direct path, but then it, turned and headed north. So they did get some, surge rains that came through, banded storms that came through, and they got some rain and some wind and stuff, but nothing that did any damage or really slowed down life. He didn't lose power or anything like that. So they really, really dodged a bullet in that area.
And they're fully out of the woods.
Yeah. As
There's
far
no
as
risk.
I know. Yeah.
I'm wondering about people all over that area, but as an anecdotal example, with your brother, did he have to board up his house and get a power generator?
Yeah. He has
water?
He has both those things. He's got a power generator. Almost all the houses down there, especially in the subdivision where he lives, they have these special shutters that, either stay on the house all the time or you keep in the garage, and when the storms come, you put them up around all the windows, and, it protects them. The grocery stores had been, basically all picked over and barren for many, many days prior, because the minute, they hear a storm's coming like that, everybody tries to be the first one at the store, to beat the crowd and to actually have a selection, because stuff goes pretty fast.
Right, and I even heard they had rations, like at the Costco's down there.
Mm-hmm.
No more than 24 case. You can't buy more than 50 bottles of water, like this bottle of water here.
Yeah.
And among other things. But one thing I find interesting is how scary they make it look on the media. But you see, especially on social media, a lot of these people almost excited about the notion of a hurricane party or a storm party.
Yeah.
My mom used to live in Florida when she was a little bit younger than I am now, and she said that when a hurricane came, everyone got excited about it.
Well, it's a great thing. It's a little scary, a little eerie. I was in Miami recently, and one of the cool things at nighttime was out in the distance, out in the ocean, the clouds, they kind of go off land at night because of the cooling. And it's literally a breathtaking, brilliant lightning storm all night long. There's no thunder. all you see are flashes, and it's the kind you see in the old movies with the lightning streaks that go in all directions like tree roots across the sky. It's really cool to see. So I think all of that gets people's juices flowing, but it's all fun and games until your roof gets blown off and you have 10 feet of water in your living room.
It's fun for people who are well equipped, well prepared, have enough money to, withstand it. They have an extra sub pump in the house. They don't have to worry about the floods, different things like that. So it's easy. I guess I should apologize for saying that it could be fun to be in a hurricane, because there's a lot of people who have had a much different experience. Going back to Katrina, remember what happened there.
Yeah.
But this hurricane is not said to be as calamitous as previous hurricanes.
Well, yeah, at least not here, but
in the Bahamas.
In the Bahamas, it was
ravaged.
terrible, because the thing with a hurricane, with what people don't really understand sometimes, is it's not necessarily, the storm itself, like coming on land or blowing by you. It's the speed at which it moves. If the hurricane is moving rather fast, then even if the winds are really high, it doesn't have a lot of time to do a lot of damage. It's in and out. It's like a, couple hour storm, it's gone, whereas it didn't even move for a couple days. And then when it did start to move, it moved 1-2 miles an hour. So it just stayed in one place, churning 189 mile an hour winds
in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah, and then that causes the storm surge. So that's when the water is basically sucked up out of the ocean, and it creates like a unnatural level of water there. And they said in some places in the Bahamas there that the surge could have been anywhere from 40 to 60 feet. So if the island only sits 20 feet above sea level and you have 60-foot or 40-foot storm surges, that means everything is 20 feet underwater for several days. So they're nasty. They're terrible.
Right. See, I'm not familiar with these sort of meteorological phenomena. Here in Canada, I mean, they're even saying that Hurricane Dorian is going to move up to Nova Scotia, on the eastern coast of Canada, which anybody who watches Trailer Park Boys, that's where it's filmed. There's sort of the Mississippi, the closest thing Canada has to a sort of Mississippi redneck culture is in our east. Our south is our east. But they're not comparable in terms of ideology. It's rare to find sort of racism, KKK culture, the things that are associated negatively with the South, compassion for the Confederate flag. You don't see so much of that. You do see the Western culture, the cowboy boots, all the elements of the Wild West that you wouldn't expect to see in Canada. You see in those parts of Canada, as well as Calgary, Alberta, Winnipeg, that whole part of the West. But they're expecting to have a sort of backlash of Hurricane Dorian in Nova Scotia, which I hope isn't too bad, because of the preponderance of trailer parks and low-income housing there. It's a very unprepared area for such a phenomenon. And I myself, the most extreme thing I've ever experienced is a tornado in Bayfield. You know Bayfield?
Yeah, Bayfield, Ontario.
You've been there before.
Yes.
And it was terrifying for me. It was horrible. A lot of debris, a lot of things got destroyed, but I'm not familiar with the whole hurricane phenomenon, because there almost seems to be one every year.
Oh, yeah.
They are vulnerable to political exploitation, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, it's the world. I mean, it doesn't matter what part of the world you go to. Each part of the world has its own unique, set of circumstances. I mean, there's out in the Pacific Ocean, they have typhoons, which is, similar to hurricanes in that they don't really spin the same way, but it's, they're all kind of the same. They're just storms with really, really high winds and, severe rainfall and thunder and lightning. And, and then in other parts of the world, you're susceptible to high tides and tsunamis based on, the way the ocean shifts, or if there's earthquakes. And, in certain parts of, middle America, Oklahoma and the Dust Belt, Kansas, you have tornadoes that come through, in the spring and summer months, and some of them can be 4 or 5 miles wide and just suck up anything in their path. I mean, a tornado is way worse than a hurricane, per square foot when it comes through.
Right. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
But I heard that this hurricane is producing tornadoes. Like, it's possible for a hurricane to produce tornadoes within the greater
absolutely. Because
hurricane.
you have the wind and the atmosphere spinning, and you have that creating areas of suction and low pressure mixed with high pressure. So it's just, it's kind of like when you let the water out of a pool or a bathtub, things start spinning around and you have little whirlpools show up here and there. It's the same type of thing in the atmosphere. So they're very unpredictable, and, the weathermen and the scientists can, do a pretty good job with their models, but it's Mother Nature. You can't predict it 100% or know what it's going to do.
Which is, to a certain extent, what we experienced in the last couple days with Donald Trump. Me personally, John, I'm nuanced on the issue because there's things that Trump did in response to Hurricane Dorian that I think are bullshit. Then there's other things that Trump responded to and the media commented on. The media, meaning everything on television except for Fox News, which I'm not 100% on board with that. I don't trust any of them. That's why we call the show The Big Flush.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what's in the toilet, whether it's shit, urine, or vomit. We hate it all and we want to get rid of it and make it clear water that we can see from the surface to the bottom of the toilet bowl clearly.
Exactly.
And this hurricane has muddied the toilet water, and a big flush is necessary for all forms of human excrement, whether it be Republican, Independent, or Democrat. So Donald Trump, starting point. First thing, he, I guess, miscalculated how far west the hurricanes would move. So he anticipated that it would move into the Gulf of Mexico, which would affect Alabama.
Yeah.
And much of western Florida. Right now, it's eastern Florida being danced around by Hurricane Dorian. The Bahamas was ravaged. And do you know the death count, John? Like something like 5 people have died?
I don't know. I haven't seen a death count. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's going to be much higher.
Much higher than 5?
Yeah, I'm sure.
What do you think is a regular death count for a hurricane? And how do those people end up dying? Are they drowning?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems with these storms is projectiles. A tornado, a storm with winds in excess of 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, it can pick up a mailbox and hurl it at, a couple hundred miles an hour, and you get hit in the forehead with that. You're not going to do too well.
Right.
So shrapnel, drowning, things collapsing on you, all kinds of terrible things like that.
Right.
But I don't know what the death count will be. I mean, who knows? I mean, did people evacuate? Will they even find some of the people? I mean, because it is an island and everything's submerged. It's hard to say. I mean, and one thing the media does that has always kind of irked me is, it's like they're foaming at the mouth, with the story when it starts, and their main goal is to get the number. What's the magic number that makes it like the degree of severity or how bad it is, and whether it's 3,000 people or 2 people, I mean, there should be no difference. And then they're all kind of like, how big is it going to be this time? Like it's some type of weird human response to it. I don't know.
I'm against the Stalinistic idea that if one person dies, it's a tragedy, and if it's 1 million, it's a statistic, because I agree that one person is a tragedy, 1 million is 1 million tragedies. However, it is a harbinger of the severity of what we're talking about when we know how many people died. Like, for example, the tsunami in East Asia. Like 250,000 people snuffed out in an instant.
Yeah.
Makes a difference in terms of your understanding of it?
Well, sure. I mean, it's Mother Nature, so these natural disasters can be life-changing. They can be, country-changing, civilization-changing. I mean,
right.
You can't mess with Mother Nature. Mother Nature is a wicked witch sometimes.
It's absolutely unpredictable.
Yeah.
And Trump, in his best effort, I guess, I don't understand why he would need it important for the states that he said were going to be affected by Hurricane Dorian and weren't to be affected. But basically, he's not getting heat. It's more criticism for miscalculating how far west the hurricane would move. He said it would move towards Alabama. It didn't. There's this big drawing that they have where he's sitting, in the Oval Office, and next to him is, I guess, his chief meteorologist or somebody who's an expert on meteorology within the White House. Mm-hmm. And they have a chart drawn up of where the hurricane would affect.
Oh, I saw that.
And they have white magic marker, which is what he was talking about. Mm-hmm. And then there's some black magic marker, which was under discussed because that's what he thought before. Now everyone's saying, oh, well, Trump is wrong about that. What else is he wrong about? Yet another opportunity. Who knows? The weather's unpredictable.
But I must correct you, my dear friend Zach. Not
What's that,
everyone
John?
Not everyone is saying that. Only everyone that hates Trump is saying that.
Which is everybody in the media who's not on Fox News.
Yes.
In the television, like network television,
Yeah,
like my parents watch. And
yeah, I mean, the hurricane is just another long line of things. Like these, and again, I'm not trying to stick up for Trump's buffoonery or his wacky tweets or the things he says.
Make sure you mention that caveat, John.
Oh, well, you
can
have
never
to.
say anything not negative about Trump without the caveat in
Well.
place. We should just have a byware, like a thing written down on paper.
Yeah.
Like the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say
Trump,
can
yeah.
and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney.
But this is the way I look at it. Like, it's almost like it's like you have a big sports arena, right? And Trump is in the middle of the sports arena. And then the stands are filled with the media and the detractors and the haters. And they've all got like binoculars or magnifying glasses. And they're waiting. And the minute he moves his little finger, they're like, oh, you moved your little finger wrong. Or, oh, you farted. Or, oh, well, your hair blew this way. Or, oh, they're just waiting. So I already knew before this hurricane ever became a strong storm that some way, shape, or form, Trump would be talked about negatively because of the hurricane. The next thing that happens, I don't care what it is, if it's something to do with Chinese trade or whether it's to do with a puppy getting hit by a car in Nebraska.
Trump didn't care about the puppy. He's inhumane.
Exactly. And people, I'm sorry, folks, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news to my left-leaning friends, and you are my friends. You're just cementing the rest of the people in the country who's in the middle and on the right to vote for him again because they hear this constantly day in and day out bashing it. They're sick of it. Everywhere I go in life, people are sick of it. And the only way they're going to shut this down is to vote for him again.
Right.
And that's what's going to happen. So you're going to have 4 more years of crying and whining, and you're doing it to yourselves, folks. I'm sorry.
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting is we have these conversations about how hard the left against it's not liberals.
Right.
I'm a liberal. I think you're a pretty liberal guy too, John.
I have my moments.
Right, but leftist, it's a completely different thing. We're going to see a year from November exactly the effect that all of this has had. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Because I feel I just look at Trump as being reelected.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In November of 2020 because of the left. He didn't need to lift a finger. His constituents, his base, and his administration didn't have to lift a finger to ensure that reelection.
No,
that's not my wish. That is just how I see things going. He has nobody to thank but Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, Cuomo, Smollett, Jussie Smollett, or what did Dave Chappelle call him? Jussie Smollett?
Juicy Smollett.
Juicy Smollett. We're going to get onto that in a little bit because we had a lot to say about Woody Allen and the Me Too movement versus the cancel movement, the cancel culture, I should say.
Cancel culture, yeah.
There's a lot going on right now, and everything is becoming politicized.
Yeah.
So everyone's going after Trump because of what he said about Alabama and the more western coasts being affected, and they weren't. The guy's not a fucking meteorologist.
No, he's not.
Don't use that. There's tons of other things about Trump that you could waste your breath on, indicating that he's stupid, which he is. We all think he's stupid. He also did the opposite thing, which is use the hurricane to exploit which is exploit the hurricane for political purposes. He talked about how he redirected $16 billion in tariffs that he collected from China and redirected that to help, I guess, Midwest farmers. I'm not sure if he only means farmers on the East Coast that could potentially be affected by hurricanes, and how hurricanes affect agriculture is something that I am here to tell you I don't understand or know about. I'm going off of something that I learned he said very recently before I had the time to look into that correlation between agriculture and hurricanes. But he used the opportunity to trump himself, to glorify himself, in the context of his victory over China in the so-called trade war. Also, we have the left and bringing up religion, which is an interesting, crazy thing for me as, you know, a self-professed liberal. Part of my liberalism, I would say, is twofold. It's my sexuality. I don't fit into the mainstream. And growing up, I always liked the Democrats because the Democrats had rational things to say about how bullshit it is for Christianity to criticize Islam, or to criticize homosexuality. However, it's crickets when they're criticizing Islam's poor opinions of homosexuality, which is why I think it's important to differentiate between a liberal and a leftist.
Yeah.
So we just had Mayor Pete, Mr. Buttigieg. He was talking about climate change in the context of this hurricane and God. He said, what do you think God would say in this context? Moreover, you had Marianne Williamson, who is living in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. She's a Democratic candidate. She said, the Bahamas, she tweeted this, and then afterwards took it down because of how ridiculous everyone knew it was. The Bahamas, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas may all be on our prayers now. Millions of us seeing Dorian turn away from land is not a wacky idea. It's a creative use of the power of the mind. 2 minutes of prayer, visualization, meditation for those in the way of the storm. So is that prayer? Is it God? Is it telepathy? Is it supernatural? Is it something that science hasn't explained yet? The ability for a collective amount of people to concentrate on the same thing.
I know exactly what it is.
And produce a result in the physical world mentally.
I know exactly what it is. I know exactly why that hurricane turned and didn't hit Florida directly or any of those other places and wipe anything out. You know what it was?
What's that?
It was luck. It was pure luck.
Dumb luck.
It was dumb luck. It was the weather forces working like they do. And the weather forces worked and the storm took a different path, and it was luck. And maybe next time they won't be so lucky.
Right. But the point is, why do we have to invoke the supernatural? I usually thought that that was the Pat Robertsons and the Christian conservatives that were into invoking the supernatural.
Yeah, it's just another type of snake oil peddler. I mean,
but it is, and I'm very much concerned about the environment, and it's not a good idea for corporations to be pumping out poison into the air. I'm not a person who is against environmentalism. I would consider myself an environmentalist. I'm against official environmentalists like AOC, who I think are more concerned with separating people from their money, or at least the people who work for her are.
Yeah.
Separating people from their money, making tariffs rather than actually implementing changes to the ways that chemicals are dispersed into the atmosphere. I'm against all that. And you got to remember Jennifer Lawrence, not too long ago, great actress. I love her. But she basically blamed the last hurricane on, said Mother Nature is taking revenge on human people, as if the environment has a omniscient consciousness like a God, which is a new form of God. It's not a Christian God or an Islamic God, but it is nevertheless something supernatural that can't be explained. And so now we have people on the left doing the same thing, which is why, again, I separate the liberals from the left. A true liberal is inquisitive of religion and the idea of worshiping or believing in things without evidence, and the leftist doesn't care about that. They just want their point to be right. So, yeah, everyone's wrong. They're wrong for going after Trump for not knowing exactly the trajectory of the damn hurricane, as he's not a meteorologist. And Trump's wrong for connecting it to the trade war with China.
Yeah, I don't know how you can correlate any of those things. It's like the news needs something to keep, up in the air. It's like they're juggling they can't drop a ball. They got to keep the balls in the air because they've got their viewers' eyeballs glued to the screens. They're like addicted. I mean, people say that kids and even adults are addicted to social media. I think there's a lot of people that are addicted to the 24-hour news cycle, and there's a lot of money to be made. I mean, the news has figured out that they can make way more money, from having sensationalized things in the news, around the clock, no matter how outlandish it is. In fact, the more outlandish and outrageous and unverified it is, the more viewers they get.
Right, because nobody seems to care.
No, nobody seems to care. I mean, truth, nobody cares if there's truth in the news anymore.
Well, there's a case to be made that we're living in a post-truth era.
I would say that that's pretty accurate. Where's the truth in anything? I mean, the only place you'll find truth now, unfortunately, or fortunately for people like us, is on the internet, in independent, broadcasts and stuff. And, most independent broadcasters that have found a niche and an audience on the internet, I mean, they don't have the same means that a big, conglomerate, news organization does as far as resources to travel and do stories or have multiple people covering, all the aspects of the story and things like that. So, but, they're still doing, I think, a better job collectively, and especially when it comes to, integrity and accuracy than, the major news networks. I mean, it's just a fact.
Right. But I also think that, and we touched upon this in the last podcast, John, about how when somebody gets finance, a radical amount of finance, that genuine element seems to disappear.
Yeah.
With regard to the Young Turks, Alex Jones, both of them are guilty of it, because both of them, and I would say more so the Young Turks with Cenk Uygur, he was really genuine in the beginning.
Yeah.
I liked the guy. And then as soon as things started to look really professional and fully decked out and great cameras, background graphics, a panel of people to talk to who, of course, all agree with him, that's when you realized he's not out for the truth anymore. He's being paid by people to be a puppet and voice a certain thing.
I didn't know to what level it was, but Jimmy Dore, who used to be on the Young Turks, who has his own program now, who's very critical of the Young Turks, now said very recently, I think in the last week or two, he was being interviewed, and he said one of the reasons he left was because of that, because they took it to the next level. Somehow, Cenk got a influx. He got whether it was one investor or a group of investors, they got a $20 million investment. And from that, they turned the Young Turks into what it is now. So $20 million is a lot of money.
Right.
A lot of money.
Right. And Cenk's a family man. He mentions his family a lot. And I understand he's got mouths to feed.
Sure.
For me, that establishes a motive.
Well, absolutely it does, but I mean...
For taking money and saying whatever the people who are giving you the money tell you to say.
But that's when that's, I guess, goes to like your integrity, right? Do you have integrity, or are you a prostitute? I mean, and a prostitute, there's many ways to be a prostitute, professionally, And, Cenk, when I first started watching him, was pretty, I thought, at least legitimate. Even if I didn't agree with his point of view, I thought he was coming from a place that he believed. He seemed very, very concerned about bringing the truth about things. Like he was fair and balanced. Even if he didn't like the fact that, oh shit, these people I don't like aren't being so bad, he would at least acknowledge that. Like he was fair.
because he's a big NFL guy. He likes sports a lot. And it was an inconvenient fact for him, the concussion element.
Yeah.
And he talked about that and he said, man, I love football, but this data, it's compelling.
Yeah.
And he relinquished that attitude as soon as the studio space changed.
Yeah.
To the point where he's going against real feminists who, within their life, have suffered, like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, calling her a neoconservative. Right? And this woman had her clitoris cut off. She can't experience sexual pleasure. And this liberal, so-called liberal network, which is why they're not liberal, they're leftist.
Yeah.
They're calling her a neocon, just like George Bush, yada, yada, yada. And they're not giving her sympathy. The woman had her clitoris cut off. Moreover, they had Sam Harris, an intellectual black belt, author of Letter to a Christian Nation and The End of Faith. Among other things, he co-founded the Killiam Foundation with Majid Nawaz, who is my opinion, the greatest champion of the idea of a secular reformation in Islam, the same way Christianity had a secular reformation under Martin Luther in the 16th century, which is what separates Christianity from Islam. People are against him. And so Sam Harris went on the Young Turks, and I've said it before, the papers fumbling everywhere, doubling down on the wrong thing and making himself look more like a fool because he has to. He has that ball and chain of his investors. He can't, even though I could almost tell Cenk understood it and he got it.
Yeah.
And that's what made him even more freaked out is, holy shit, this is so rational. This makes what my opponent is saying makes so much sense, but I can't agree with him. I know. I'm locked down to this. That's why I got paid $20 million. So,
which is ridiculous because if you build the popularity of your show and your audience base on being a certain way, and then then you change, you go in a different direction, you isolate and alienate a lot of your audience that was there, that built you, and that is also or was also extremely loyal. And the same thing you can say about like you mentioned with Alex Jones. I mean, Alex Jones, had a very, very loyal audience of very interesting people. And, say whatever you want about Alex Jones, he wasn't full of shit on everything. Some of the things that he uncovered or spoke about turned out to be absolutely 100% true. So you couldn't just write him off as an idiot. Like Bohemian Grove, he snuck in. He said that rich and powerful people in our government, congressmen, senators, presidents, wealthy businessmen, world leaders would all get together at this retreat in above San Francisco in wine country, and would get together and have these rituals where they either sacrificed babies or sacrificed things that were imitated babies, like a mock baby for a mock ceremony, and do these really bizarre things, and then it would turn into a big homosexual sex orgy all through the whole place. And there's evidence that not only it happened because he snuck in and got video footage of it, but even President Nixon is on tape talking about being there and what a crazy experience it was, and how the people that go there are just out of their mind, and it's so weird.
I really hope that Alex Jones didn't film himself having anal sex with George Bush or Mitt Romney or any of those kind of people. The visuals are just a little bit too much.
You're giving food to your leftist friends right now by mentioning
my leftist Marxist homosexual friends.
I mean, Jones has had other things. He's been a very big staunch advocate for the 9/11 Truth people, which there's a lot of evidence to support these people and what their claims are. But then he comes up with wacky shit.
The gay frogs.
The gay frogs. He talked with extensively a bunch of times with David Icke, who's very, very famous for talking about shapeshifters and lizard people among us, which, is, well, okay, whatever.
And he sells boner pills, too.
Hey, man, he's You can say anything you want about David Icke, too, and Alex Jones, because Alex Jones sells survival stuff now.
Well, you know what? They sold it on Fox News for a while, too.
Yeah.
They were like, if you need survival seeds for the tumult, for the stormy years ahead under Obama, you need to get these survival pills and for the elderly gentlemen.
But the thing is, I mean, Alex
pills.
Jones, it was like Cenk, he had a very loyal audience, too. And then he brought a producer in that was a former CIA operative, and then a good portion of his audience was like, hey, wait a minute. Where did you get all this money from to have this super powerhouse studio? And at the same time, coincidentally, you now have a former CIA operative as your lead producer on your whole program and shows. What's going on here? And a lot of his audience, backed away from it at that point. So,
boner pills.
Yeah, boner pills.
He sells boner pills, John.
Yes, I know.
There's no coming back from that, though.
Boner pills.
There's no coming back from the Gen X.
I would
revitalized male, Revitamale, whatever it is.
If I had that supplement, you know what I'd call him? I'd call him Napoleon Bonaparte.
Hey, dude, you have an idea.
Hey.
Maybe we should start doing that here.
Hashtag
Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, hashtag Napoleon
I'm not ready to
Bonaparte.
part with my boner just yet.
I'm going to the U.S. Patent Office this afternoon, man.
Oh, my gosh.
Lord.
Yeah, you actually should do it before we actually publish this episode. Because somebody else is going to come with the idea. Just put some guanine, some taurine, some milk thistle, caffeine in a pill, and that's a fucking boner pill.
It's a boner
You're
pill,
going to
man.
keep that white. You're going to revitalize that 40-year marriage with your
Yes.
wife overnight.
Yes.
But he sells that. I don't get it. And the reason I don't get it is because, especially for my age group, people look like Alex Jones, Michael Savage as boner-needy, miserable old men. And that's why they're so anti-liberal.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's the idea that, those young people out in California just developed something, or that Mark Zuckerberg, what's he trying to do? He's young and richer than me, and I worked all my hard life to get here. And there's an element of that. There's snottiness from the millennials towards the older people, and the older people have snottiness towards the millennials,
Sure.
because there is an element of jealousy that the millennials have all this knowledge and technology at their disposal.
yeah, definitely.
And a horizon ahead of them. Mm-hmm. And if I was 70 years old and still with it, and I was not a good person, and the way I responded to situations like that was in the negative way, not the positive. But these fucking young people, they
Sure.
got all this technology, and they think they know everything, and I'm going to die, and I don't even know what's going to happen after this, and fuck them, I hate them. Just be excited for people.
Yeah.
When I'm old and shit's changing, if I don't agree with it all.
Yeah, but then, to give the older people the benefit of the doubt, I mean, they also look to things that are, they see a place like California on the news where, people are living in tents on the street and shitting on the sidewalk and pissing on the sidewalk. And people are getting sick from the bacterial diseases that are starting to come out of there. And it's against the law in California if one of these people are laying in front of your business to move them aside. And if you call the police, they won't move them either.
Right.
And they see stuff like that, and people are shitting on the sidewalk in America,
Especially in some of the most beautiful cities in not
Yeah.
only America but the world.
yeah. So older people can't even comprehend that type of thing going on, or legislation that protects that kind of thing. And it's not about protecting homeless people. That's not about that. If local governments or state governments or the federal government wanted to really do something to help homeless people, they would really find the money and build some facilities and at least house them off the street so there isn't some type of health epidemic, brewing.
Right, and I agree, but the problem is that those homeless people are not all Californians.
No.
There are people from Chicago who are homeless that are like, fuck, I want to move somewhere warm
Yeah.
and outdoors.
And-
I was just, not to cut you off, John, but I was just in Split, Croatia, the city of Split. Not Split, but that's the name of it, Split.
Split.
You got to imagine the person who invented the term for the name of that city was not English.
He was a gymnast.
They didn't know that it means divide or cut in half or anything like that.
Who put his legs on the balance beam?
On the balance beam. It was Diocletian, the Emperor Diocletian, who you're most familiar with for having fed Christians to the lions. However, if you're familiar with the rhetoric of most scholars to date, it is quite likely an invention of St. Augustine, who wanted Diocletian to be a persecutor of Christians to enhance the martyr complex, when in fact Diocletian's wife was a Christian.
Now, nobody under 30, nobody under 20, nobody under 30 or 20. I know. Zach is very intellectual, folks.
Oh, that's nice of you to say.
Well,
on
it's
my
very
where
true.
accounts, where I care about it, I am.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me about calculus or algebra. I agree with the early Islamic mullahs who banned algebra. It's the work of the fucking devil. That's the one area where I agree with those fundamentalists. Algebra, calculus, numbers and letters interacting together, and they're supposed to mean something. It's sinister, and anybody who practices that should be burned at the
A
stake.
plus B equals AB, which stands for American Bandstand, which is no longer on TV.
A plus B equals C?
C. A bouncy C.
Ah, I see.
Yes.
Where were we?
We were floating across the universe, talking about all kinds of crazy things.
Yes, we were.
Yes. They must have evaporated when the hurricane came through and sucked our energy away.
Evaporated into the ether. It's just interesting to me because of
Yeah.
how people can take a hurricane and make it so frickin' political.
Yeah.
Or even domestic. Like, it's not that big a deal of a hurricane. The Bahamas, yes, I agree, and we need to talk about that.
Did we see what Alex Jones had to say about the hurricane?
No, I don't
Or
watch
Cenk
out.
Uygur?
No, I mean, either way, they're going to have the opposite flavor. It's going to be sweet and spicy, or bitter and sweet, but it's going to be goofy on both ends.
Well, hey, never.
I don't agree with anybody. Like, it's all fucked up. They're all polarized. They're all goofy.
Never let a good tragedy go to waste.
In your home state of Michigan,
Yes, I know it well.
Miss Whitmer, Gretchen Whitmer,
Ugh.
who's got, even better than you, Jan. And we don't make fun of you.
Well, I'm glad
But
to
it's
hear
fun
that.
because we don't call you John, it's Jan.
What, Jan, like Jan Brady?
Jan.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's not ridicule. It's just, that your pronunciation. We're not
Are you
used to
taking me out to a safe island?
Epstein's Island,
In
the Lolita
yes,
Express.
in
No.
sales, we say when you're about to give somebody bad news or totally insult them, it says take your client on a safe island first.
On a safe island.
Yeah, to an island, to a place that's very safe. So you get them all feeling warm and fuzzy before you drop the hammer on their head.
Oh, yeah, it's just like, don't let the lamb see the knife.
Yeah, it's a metaphorical safe island.
Yes. You learned that at Toyota, I'm sure.
Yes, I did, Zaxxon.
Zaxxon.
So what did Gretchen Whitmer do?
Well, and I don't know where I stand on this. Is Gretchen Whitmer left or right? What is she?
Oh my God, she's left.
She's left.
Oh God, she's left.
But see, this is what I'm fucking talking about. Why the left is supposed to be the people who are like, yeah, do whatever you want, smoke weed, get laid. If you need to have an abortion, fucking get it.
I don't think she's gotten laid in a while because she seems a little on edge.
Oh, why is that?
Well, I don't know. It could be she's a little rough around the edges.
I feel like to do a job like that, you have to get laid relentlessly. It's the only thing that can motivate me to be a governor or people go after Trump and it's just, oh yeah, well, grab him by the pussy. Yeah, man, that's the fucking reason he goes to work and looks like a douchebag and gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Why else do people do it? They're not humanitarian. It's not altruistic.
If Tiesto did that, you wouldn't be mad at him.
Yeah,
He's a world famous DJ.
No, I know who Tiesto is. 10 seconds before sunrise.
Uh-huh.
I love Tiesto.
Yes.
And I've been I've been to Tomorrowland.
If George Clooney did that, all the girls would be like, oh, I wish I was the one that was there. Why didn't I get a call?
Or not to mention any rapper.
Yeah.
Lil Wayne.
Or Bradley Cooper or anybody along those lines.
But listen, and I'm not against Lil Wayne or Drake or any of these people. They make money doing what they do, and more power to them. Especially, I like Lil Wayne because he did not take the bait for Black Lives Matter. He walked up out of the interview. He was like, dude, like, white people are in my fucking staff. Just like that lady who was at Afrofuture Fest in Detroit. Who was like, wait a minute. Her staff members, Caucasian members of her staff came up to her and were like, yeah, well, we had to pay $20 and everyone else had to pay 10. She's like, what? You have a racially discriminatory admission policy? No, I'm not doing this show. I'm not doing this show. And she was a performer at that event.
Yeah.
You know? So, but anyway, Gretchen Whitmer, she's liberal. Everyone talks about the right wing as being the more conformist, obedience, fascistic people, but it's the liberals who are more like that, and that's what we talk about here on The Big Flush. So Gretchen put a 6-month ban on flavored e-cigarettes, just the flavored kind. 6-month ban that can be renewed after 6 months. So basically, it's a 12-month ban of flavored e-cigarettes in the name of making sure that young people don't have an early enticement to consume nicotine. Because if they start when they're 13 with the flavored e-cigarettes, the idea is that by the time they're 18, their nicotine tolerance will be so high that they're going to go out seeking normal cigarettes. Well, my point is, why did she ban those? Why didn't she just ban fucking normal standard tobacco cigarettes?
Well, I mean, probably. Who knows? I mean, there could be lobbying. When I first heard that, I thought maybe there's lobbying involved because the cigarette industry has already had major blows against it. I mean, every state has enacted laws over the past decade and a half or so where smoking is banned in most public places all over. Not only here, but maybe, in Europe and other places, depending. And then, there were those huge lawsuits that people filed against the tobacco industry for getting cancer and other health problems. So they've taken such a hard hit. So now the tobacco companies have competition, which they didn't have before, which means there's something biting into their bottom line that's already, in peril. So when I hear about legislation like this being passed, I really do question the motives, because why not ban all e-cigarettes if you're going to ban them? If they're unhealthy for kids or anybody, and they have nicotine in them so they're addictive, it's not like if you've already started smoking the flavored ones that you're not addicted. So when the flavored ones are banned, you're still going to be looking for the unflavored ones. You're going to be looking for something to take its place in the interim. And then the other thing is if you're going to ban them, why on earth is there a time limit? Why would the ban expire? Does that mean in 6 months from now or a year from now that they're not as health damaging? Or
see, that's why I asked you, because I'm not familiar with Michigan or constitutional states' rights as you are. So there's a 6-month ban. I don't know. I think that if Ms. Whitmer wanted to have it forever, she would have had it. But there's some kind of stipulation within the Constitution, within the law, that makes her only able to do it for 6 months.
Okay.
That's my position on it.
Okay.
Because she wants to do it for as long as possible because of what it does to young people or whatever. But it's the same old story. Like, as I went to high school in Europe, I drank in high school. I partied and puked and did, between the ages of 15 and 19, what most young people do on this continent, between the ages of 19 and 23, right, in their university years. By the time I moved back to North America, to Canada, to go to university, and people were doing the same shit that I already was bored of.
Wow.
So when I said, oh yeah, I was drinking at 15, 16, partying, puking, going to raves, getting laid, having threesomes, my orgy days were before I was 20. Everyone's like, oh my God, that's so fucked up. But you know what? I got it the fuck out of my system. And by the time I needed to go to university and focus on my work and the books, it was all there. It's like, oh yeah, man, we're getting a 40 and we're going to a fucking oath party. And I was like, well, I'd rather go to a swanky club where people are well dressed and sipping champagne and people are beautiful and cool. And I was at that level in my early 20s, you know, because all of that nonsense I'd gotten out of my system. There was no more curiosity. And I am a curious person. The only drugs I've not done are heroin, crack, and PCP. And I don't do drugs. But I had to, you know, many years ago, I needed to know what they were all like.
Allegedly.
Well, there's tons of other drugs that I haven't done that are like have 5 syllables in their name. But in terms of the drugs that everybody knows about, I've done them all except for crack, heroin, and PCP. And the only one I liked was marijuana. And that's the only one I continue to do to this day, legally in Canada. Fuck you.
That's nice.
Not you, John, and not you, audience, but anybody who has a problem with that. Fuck you.
Yeah, those people.
Those people. The people who are like, oh my God, it's a gateway drug. And that's kind of my problem with this Whitmer bitch. Like, it's a gateway drug. How do you know that? I can smoke cigarettes socially, and I don't go out looking for more nicotine.
Well, I don't know.
Everyone's an individual. Quit lumping people up.
But I mean, that, you know, is it a good idea for, you know, underage people to have access to these things? Me personally, I don't think so. I mean, you know, there's been stories in the news recently where younger people have had severe health reactions that have almost killed them. I think one girl did end up dying from smoking an e-cigarette. So there are, you know, definite health concerns. And the other kind of strange thing about the Whitmer thing is that this law that they just passed, or this thing that she just signed, is that it's already illegal for people underage to smoke e-cigarettes or cigarettes anyways. So why does there need to be a designation for flavor ones? It's just like, you know, lawmakers, they pass these laws, or they put things out in the public, I think, sometime for spectacle and show, you know, to make it look like they're doing something. Because, for instance, you know, murder is a crime, okay? It shouldn't matter what the motivation is. So to say if it's a hate crime or a robbery or a carjacking, you know, murder is murder. So if you get charged with murder, obviously you're going to take the circumstances into account as far as, you know, what the penalty should be. But as far as having like different degrees or terms or names for the same law, or, you know, it's same thing with like firearm laws. I mean, there's already laws on the books that, you know, you can't just shoot somebody. So why is... If only. So to parse and make additional laws for the same thing, to me, is just grandstanding. Since e-cigarettes are already illegal for people under 18 in the state of Michigan. Already illegal. So why does there need to now be an executive governor order saying that flavored e-cigarettes are now illegal? Well, they're already illegal. So why the whole thing? So the motivation, who knows what the motivation is behind it, but it's certainly not to like keep e-cigarettes or anything out of the hands of kids. I mean, the law's already there.
Right.
Enforce the law.
So I agree with you on the e-cigarette point, but there was subtext within what you just said that I want to...
What's that?
...explore and take umbrage with and disagree with you, John. Ooh. You're not going to pour boiling acid on me for not being 100% in league with your opinion?
No, especially since you used a word like umbrage. It's a very good word.
So, okay, I agree with you that it's goofy. If kids are are allowed to smoke already, why would you make a specific banning of the flavored cigarettes? But I do disagree on the issue of there are contextual things to consider with regard to a specific crime. So you take, and this is where I talk about the death penalty. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to remind me where we're talking about e-cigarettes. In about 3 minutes, I'm going to forget that we were talking about e-cigarettes. You're going to remind me that we were talking about e-cigarettes and that we're moving on after that to the firearms issue, because it connects to that, you know, deeply with Walmart and Kroger that's the next point, after e-cigarettes. But you brought me to an interesting point where the differentiation between a crime that has the same overall umbrella title, there is nuance within it. So you look at homicide. Did somebody break in, some young person break into a convenience store when they were young and ignorant and didn't understand the difference between life and death and the finality of death? And they shot the person who worked at the convenience store. Do I think that that person should be put to death, especially if they're young? No. No. They need to be put in jail for about 20 years. And it needs to be a rehabilitating experience, not a punitive experience. And then they should be eligible for parole in 20 years. If they haven't changed, keep them there,
You're much more thoughtful than I am.
But there's also a thing, like Ted Bundy, for example. Oh, yeah, he's a murderer. He killed a few women. No, he didn't just kill them. The women were found with, 1/3 of the diameter of their throat, or the circumference of their throat. 1/3 of what it originally was remained because they were strangled so intensely. And the evidence like that makes it different. Their thighs, you could see the muscle, the muscle fiber of their legs because of how savagely he ripped off their panties. Then you look at situations where the coroner can say, oh, the person shot her or him in the heart and they were dead. And then he shot the other person. And there's clear indication that, and because of the gun he used, there were only 6 bullets. And he knew they were dead when those 6 bullets ran out. Nevertheless, he reloaded to continue shooting them.
Yeah, but
and that's what warrants the death penalty. For me.
And
people
I
were
agree.
horrible like that. It's all murder, but it's just the little differences. Did you kill children? Did you masturbate while they were dying? Did you enjoy it? Was it a murder you committed because you were so desperate that you needed money?
Yeah, but when you start, the end result is still the same, though. The end result is that A, the person is dead. B, if, there's really only a couple ways to look at a murder. If there was intention and malice, or if there wasn't intention and malice, or if it was accidental. Now you can layer all kinds of different situational stuff on that. And in a way, I think sometimes lawmakers pass certain laws kind of as feel-good laws to the victims. So they get a sense of there's justice because now, like you said, maybe, it was a child murder from an abduction. So now
like Jessica's Law. Yeah,
something like that. So but at the end result, it's the same thing. And the finality is there's only at least in America, there's only 2 severe penalties you can receive, which are the most severe, which is life in prison without parole or the death penalty. There's nothing more severe than that, or there's no longer sentence than that. So if a crime...
Or shorter.
In terms
of the death penalty,
sure,
hopefully.
Sure, but as far as the crime goes, you can stack and level all these different charges that are symbolic and that, lend some type of emotional support to the victims or the families of people that, have succumbed to these terrible people. But at the end of the day, you really just need one law. You just need murder is illegal, and the job of the court and the prosecution is to determine all these factors that you talked about. What is the level of horrendousness to this murder? Was it accidental? Was it a crime of passion? Was it planned? Did it spark out of anger? Somebody came home and found their husband and wife sleeping with somebody else and they just in a rage killed somebody. You have all these factors. That's the job of the court and prosecution. But the crime, no matter how many layers or levels or names you give to it, is still the same crime with the same end result punishment if the crime was severe enough. So I just think and we're talking in terms of the most grandiose, most horrible crime, that there is, which is murder. So the only thing worse than murder would be mass murder. Or rape and murder of a child.
Yes.
Same thing, but it still goes to the same thing. But when you go to like lower level things like we're talking about, like an e-cigarette,
I know it started that way,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm trying to like explore the how extreme we can make these differences between a crime: flavored cigarette versus or flavored e-cigarette versus real cigarette.
Yeah.
Somebody who shot somebody at a convenience store out of fear because they were young and stupid, and you know, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Right. Those are, to me, those are
BTK
all,
kind
those
of
are
killings.
all factors that go into determining, the punishment for the crime. But how many pages thick does the law book need to be? Like if you there's so many laws on the books in the United States Congress, right? I remember when I was in political science class, my professor came in and he brought in the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, and there was like a 5 or 6 volume set, like I don't know, like almost 36 inches long. These books, if you line them up, having just to do with regulations and laws regarding truck tires. I mean, there's so many levels of bureaucracy to where sometimes it's really just simple if you allow it to be.
I understand what you're saying, and my closing position is that people watching at home who know the law better than I do, which is almost everybody watching the show right now, whether you have a law degree or not. John knows the law better than I do. He's got a lot of literature at home, and he'd be happy to debate you or discuss with you, depending on your nature. My closing position is basically that there needs to be legislation that discerns the nuance between the intention of the person committing the crime. BTK, Dennis Rader, broke into people's homes. He cut their phone wires, waited for them to come home, and at gunpoint tied them up to the point where they were helpless, raped the women, and put bags on all of their heads and masturbated as they were all suffocating to death. If somebody went into your home, John, and did that, I would want to kill them personally.
Well, they wouldn't have got that far because I would have shot them with my AK-47.
Well, they had guns too, those people. You know, it's all about the right place. If your AK-47's in your bedroom, John, and somebody puts a gun to your face, you're not going to be able to get it.
That's true.
You know, it's all about situation and circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, this is up for debate. I'm the first to admit that I don't know the U.S. law on all of these things. I know that there's a lot of nuance. I'd like to hear what other people think. And I know John and I know myself would be happy to interact with any position, no matter how much it agrees or disagrees with what our current one is.
Absolutely.
So, John,
yes.
We got to move on because we were talking about guns, and we were talking about personal control. So, Walmart and Kroger, okay, 2 big companies, are banning concealed firearms in their stores, even within the 31 states that have open and carry liberties. This includes, of course, everybody who has an open and carry license, and I have family members in Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania who have those licenses and who also shop at Walmart.
Yeah.
And I'm yet... help me out, John. As an American, how do I approach talking to them about this issue? How do I tell them to take their shit off when they go into Walmart and leave it in the car?
Well, you don't. I mean, first of all, it's foolish for these companies to do that, especially Walmart. Walmart has, there's a majority of their stores in the south of the United States where, there's a lot of gun carrying and gun-minded Americans. So first of all, I don't think a lot of these people are going to willingly, just leave their belts in the car. Second of all, it's
why not though? Why can't they just leave it in the car and just go to Walmart and put it back on when they get out? Why do they always have to have a damn gun with them?
I'll tell you why, Zach. Have you ever been held up at gunpoint? In your life, have you ever been held up at gunpoint? With a gun put to your head?
No.
Okay, I have.
I know that. You've told me about it before. Elaborate us.
So it's actually happened multiple times in my life.
How many times have somebody put a loaded gun to your head?
5 or 6, actually.
All in Michigan.
All in Michigan. Yeah, once when I was about 12 or 13 with my dad at a grocery store. It was a Great Scott grocery store, which is similar to Kroger. We were in line getting ready to check out, and this guy came walking in the store the wrong way and decided to pick our lane and walked right into our lane. And as soon as the lady in front of us pulled out with her cart, he walked right up and put a gun to my dad's head and backed him up and put a gun to the cashier and demanded all the money. And my dad got between me and the guy, and he was very, very shaky and unstable, and she gave him all the money, and he looked, and for a second it looked as if he was going to shoot us, but he didn't. And he left the store with his money, and then they called the police. And, that kind of thing doesn't happen all the time. I mean, it's not like, there's robberies or pickpockets or knife stabbings or gunfire inside the nation's Walmarts and supermarkets on a daily basis or a monthly basis or on a yearly basis.
But 5 times is a lot.
5
People who are watching this that don't live in America will consider that radical. Like, it's like might as well be struck by lightning 5 times.
But that's
because people don't have to deal with that in countries where they have strict gun laws.
No, you're right, but America is America. There's so many guns in America that the genie's been out of the bottle since way before either you or I were born. And it's only been in the last 20 years or so, give or take, that things have gone in a really wrong direction. I mean, guns have been in this country for years. People drove around with rifles and handguns. You didn't even need to have a license to have a gun in America for, most of the first part of
Or to drive a car.
Or to drive a car. And, kids would bring them to school for show and tell. They'd leave them in their locker. It was just part of the culture, and there wasn't anything like this going on. So what changed is the mentality of people here, not the accessibility to the guns or weapons. But I mean, people get, really, really upset when there's some horrible thing that happens, and rightly so. Some mass tragedy, at a Walmart or a grocery store, should never happen. It's a scary thing, but the world is a scary place. I mean, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I remember on the news all the time, in Israel or Paris or London, Ireland, just people going about their day, and car bombs would blow up or blow up at a coffee shop. I mean, for years and years, that kind of stuff didn't happen in America. It happened in other parts of the world. We would just see it on the news. Now that some of those kind of things are happening in America, people are losing their mind over it, and rightly so. Nobody wants to live in that kind of environment. But, it really still is like getting hit by lightning, because there's 350 million people in this country that go about their day every single day. How many millions of people a day go to grocery stores every week, every month, go to Walmart? There's no incidents that happen. And in the remote chance that something horrible happens, it is like getting hit by lightning. The odds of that happening, are so minute based on the population and everything. And of course, one person or, being slain or anybody being slain is horrific for the family. It's a black eye in society. It shouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. But the dumbest thing that a store or something like that can do is to prevent people, lawful gun owners, from being inside. Because I'm telling you that if you're in a grocery store and some crazy man starts shooting, or woman, and nobody has the means to defend themselves, you almost guaranteed that you're going to have mass casualties. Now, the last shooter, I forget which one it was of the two, but somebody shot the guy and killed him within like less than a minute of him starting shooting because somebody was armed and they took him out.
You're not talking El Paso, or are you?
I don't remember if it was Dayton or El Paso, but it was one of the two. But imagine if they hadn't taken him out, how much more damage he would have done. So I think it's just them trying to make a political stand. I think they're probably trying, somebody in their marketing department or in their legal department is like, well, this is a smarter legal position for us to take. And, you know, it may never even come to pass at any other stores. There may never be another shooting at a Walmart.
But I don't think there was. I don't know if there was. I mean, it's more about Walmart trying to virtue signal, I guess, in similar ways that when you go to a gay pride festival, there's all these big corporate banners that are saying, oh, yeah, we're for gay rights. But if you actually look at the CEO, their history isn't consistent with that.
See, it's you know, I don't know. I think as a business, I think it's a dumb move because, especially in Walmart's case, like I said, in a lot of rural parts of the country, whether it be down south, out west, or even up in the north in the Montanas and Nebraska and stuff, in far remote communities, which usually are very heavy gun communities because there's, you know, a certain level of farming and hunting and other things that go along and living in a rural type community, their customer base is going to be people like this. So,
like, what do you mean by this?
Like people that own guns and carry guns.
Yeah.
I mean, if you
so
go to,
why does Walmart feel confident enough? And I mean, remember, Walmart owns, what's the number on this? What's the statistic? Walmart has 20% of the market share of ammunition sales. Because remember, it's not just them banning people who have open carry license within the 31 states that have that.
Sure.
I don't know if they have metal detectors when people come in to make sure that nobody has that. I hope they do, because then it won't work. Because, like you said, and I agree with you, it's like saying, oh, we're banning shoplifting here at Walmart. Well,
right.
We're not going to shoplift, but there's people there who will. So that's why at Walmart, every time I check out a Walmart and go to the McDonald's part of the complex, they check my bag and they seal it with a thing to make sure that I won't do it. So hopefully they're following up by putting metal detectors and having
that won't even work.
Airport situation.
Even if they put metal detectors. First of all, what do you want to be frisked before you go in and out of a Walmart or a grocery store just to run in and grab a bottle of wine?
Me personally, I don't want to go into a Walmart at all. Ever.
It's a great experience, Zach, let me tell you.
Well, I know. I've had it. I've taken a lot of pictures, people of Walmart.
Yes.
And it's not me being a snob. I'm not a snob at all. I support small businesses, and Walmart put them out of business, and that's why I don't go. I'm not a snob at all.
No, you're right, they did. But, I mean, if somebody wants to shoot up a Walmart, you know, there's plenty of people walking around the parking lot. They don't even need to go inside the Walmart to shoot up a bunch of people. So it's
doing the visuals.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The whole premise,
probably good for the evolution of mankind in a way. But.
You know, and then of course, you know, since I'm the conspiracy side of this duo, you know, they are trying, folks. They've been trying for the last decade, 15 years or so. They've been trying to disarm America. Why? Why the big push? Again, if you look at it purely from a mathematical or a statistical standpoint, like if you were an actuary working for an insurance company and you were buying policies against being shot, your policy premiums would be so low because the odds of you getting shot in America, even as crazy as the news media sounds America to be, you probably do have better odds of winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning, both, as opposed to actually being shot. That's just a fact.
No, that's fine, but if you have to resort to the lottery and lightning for shooting, that's kind of desperate, isn't it? Because the rest of the world, we don't have those kind of problems.
It's not desperate at all.
Those countries are disarmed. They don't have arms. And if there was something going on in those countries where people were being taken advantage of and if they only had guns, it would be better. Why doesn't America, like, what are you worried about happening by relinquishing the guns?
Look at what's going on in our government. Our government is bought and paid for. People, people on the left that hate.
Everyone's is, so is Canada's.
But America is the only bastion. America is almost like the only bastion of freedom, like country that's ever existed the way it exists.
How is it different than Canada?
How
is it different than America? And I mean, in terms of day-to-day life, like we actually have more vacation time, especially in Europe. They have way more vacation time. People are not worried about their paycheck or losing their job because the government's going to help them and they're going to be able to go on their vacation to the Bahamas. New York City, liberal city. Everywhere I went, and this is anecdotal, people can disagree with me, and you too, John, but everyone's on the phone angry. Fuck you! Yeah, we were supposed to make that deal. No, my life is over now. There's no safety net to protect me, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't understand when Americans say, oh, we're the bastion of freedom, and they talk about the Constitution. The Founding Fathers were basically just rich British people who didn't want to pay taxes, and they were happy to let poor people be cannon fodder for them. What do you mean by the fact that it's the last bastion of freedom? Well, how is Canada not as free as you guys?
Well, you're not free as us as far as starting a business. We don't have the same taxation now that most countries do.
Fair point.
I can start a business for less than $100, and I won't be taxed, at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of my income either. That's what I mean by that. Why do people, want to come to America if it's such a violent, scary, horrible place that is unfair and destitute? It's not. It's, with all of its problems, it's one of the best places to come and have a life in the world. Now, Canada's a beautiful country. And
people come here, too. 13% of the population is not white. Same with Britain, France, and a lot of other countries.
And Canada's very close to America. North America is, by and large, a very good place, compared to everywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. The reason I make the point about hitting the lottery, is to show the absurdity of how they make it sound like the media and the people that hate, guns or however you want to say it. It's the absurdity of what they put forward. Because if you watch the news, you would believe or be made to believe that the minute you step outside of your door, you are in peril of losing your life at any second because of how violent and unstable the place is. And that literally down the street at your local grocery store right now as we speak, Zach, right here in Windsor, you're going to walk in there later to get a bottle of wine and some lunch meat, and some lunatic's going to walk in and kill 40 people. And that's in every city in America. By like 6 p.m. tonight, somebody's on the hot seat to die. Like it's a game, and it's all bullshit. It's not true. Bad things like...
But you were held at gunpoint 5 times.
Yeah, I was. And I'm lucky that I survived.
I've never even remotely had to have that anxiety. And so you're saying it's a safe country, but you were held at gunpoint 5 times.
Yeah, but you got to look at the circumstance. Number one, the grocery store one, you can't explain that one. That was in a very nice community.
You mean your experience at the grocery store?
Yeah, my experience at the grocery store. I grew up in a nice town called Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah, it is a nice town.
Safe, the police response, you call the police, they're there. I think nationally they used to have the 4th best response time in America. So you call them, they're there in a minute and a half, maybe. So this shit can happen anywhere, not just in poor or desolate areas. It can happen in the best cities. The 4 times I was held up, I was working at a convenience store, a 7-Eleven store that was close to a major freeway that fed, the city of Detroit, and people would come in from the city and they'd get off the freeway ramp. They'd come in and steal beer. I think all 4 times it was over beer. They'd come in, and they'd steal cash too. You put a gun to your head, give me all the money in the register. And
so specifically your experience with the gun violence and that's the 2nd out of 5.
That happened. I worked at a 7-Eleven convenience store, and the summer, I worked there about 9 months. In the 9 months that I worked there, I was held up at gunpoint 4 times. And also a very, like I said, a nice community, but the community was right on the expressway ramp that fed right into the city.
So you were held at gunpoint how many?
4 times.
4 times.
Yes.
And this is only the second experience.
Yes, and then, 4 different experiences.
Wait, so so you said you were held up at gunpoint 5 times.
Yep, and then when I owned a limousine service.
Wait, slow down. So the first time was when you were at the grocery store with your dad as a kid.
Yep, as a kid.
Then the next 4 times collectively combined to qualify as the next 4 out of 5 times?
Next 4 out of 5 times I was held up.
But there was more than 5 now.
Actually, there was 6.
Okay,
actually.
and you've told me about the 6th.
Yeah.
So tell me about that when you were doing the limousine driving and the police, you got the gun from the kid and
Yeah,
the police
so,
told you about it. Tell us about that.
So I wasn't a gun person, really. I had a couple rifles that my grandfather gave me that I hunted with when I was just out of high school. And then they just sat in my closet forever. I never used them. I really didn't have any interest, so it wasn't really part of my life. And yeah, when I was held up, I didn't. I was young. I was in my mid to late 20s. I didn't carry a gun. It wasn't at the time. The laws in Michigan weren't such that it was easy to get a concealed carry permit. So to get one, you really would have had to jump through hoops, and you really needed at that time to have a legitimate reason, like you worked for an armored car company or you were a security guard or a private investigator. You had to have a reason to have one.
Nowadays, it's just you get one. So it's easier to get a gun than it is to get a flavored e-cigarette in Michigan now.
No, not at all.
Why?
Not at all. That's ludicrous and ridiculous. I'm not letting you get away with that. When you go to buy a gun, you have to go in, you have to show your ID. They run a background check on you.
They do have background checks.
Absolutely.
Since when?
They always have. When people that hate guns or Riles say we need legislation, we need expanded background checks, I have yet to have anybody explain to me what that means. Because when you go in, at least in Michigan, when you go to buy a firearm at a gun store, you walk in, you say, okay, yes, I want this handgun, whatever. They're like, okay. They take your driver's license. You have to fill out the card, your social security number, your address, age, all that stuff. And the guy steps away from the counter, and he calls the FBI. They call the FBI.
Every time?
Every time. Every time. This happens every time.
And they do a search on your record, your permanent record.
Yeah, you give it to the guy. He goes over. He calls the number, and it's run through the local, like the sheriff's database, the state police database, the FBI database. It's run through whatever system of databases law enforcement has.
Yeah.
And depending how busy you are that day, you could be standing there waiting 10 minutes. You could be standing waiting there a half hour, an hour, just however long it takes. And then once it comes back and it's cleared, then they can complete the sale. That's how it works. So there's a background check done. And then once you get the firearm, you have to take it, or at least depends on the city, but some cities you still have to go to the police department and you have to give them your fingerprints. That's just to buy it. Now, if you want to carry it, that's a completely separate thing. You don't just get to, just because you bought it, that doesn't mean you can legally carry it. You can't. You can't carry it around just because you bought it. Now you have to get a concealed carry permit, which means you have to take an approved class. You have to pass the class. You have to pass the shooting elements of the class. So if you can't hit a target, they're not going to pass you. You're not going to be able to carry it. So you have to.
Is this just in Michigan? I've never heard of this before. This is not something that is popularized on the media.
This is exactly the way it is in almost every state I know that that offers concealed carry.
So if people want to look it up, they can go to Protocol for Concealed Carry License, NRA. Like who is the one that officiates this collectively?
The state of Michigan. All you have to do is go to the state of Michigan.
Yeah, but what about people in Kansas? What about people in California?
They go to their state website, and every state government has a website that has to do with firearms. They all have their own firearm laws.
All 31 states that have a concealed carry license have a page on their state government website.
Yes.
That stipulates that.
Yes.
See, people need to look that up.
Yes, it's absolutely. That's exactly how it is.
Because we look at it here in Canada as people just a conceal and carry license means that you can just have a gun.
Hell no.
Go and buy it. And I've been to North Carolina, and I've been in a liquor store. It's the only time I saw it sign on the door. If you have a concealed gun,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot bring it in.
Yeah. No, I mean
liquor stores.
Yeah. No, I mean, and so yeah, so to get your concealed carry, you have to go through all this stuff. And then once you get the certificate that says you passed the class and that you passed the shooting requirements, you take that certificate down to your local sheriff, mm-hmm. right, or your local county. That's the way it here is in Michigan, whatever county you live in. They fingerprint you, and the county also does another background check on you that you turn it into. So they look through state laws, making sure that you don't have any, arrests for anything that would be, that the law says you can't have a gun for, that you can't carry a gun for. So there's a background check done at that point by, the sheriff's department, which I'm assuming goes back to the database to look to make sure you don't have any local, state, or federal warrants or arrest records. And in some counties, you can get it back the same day if they're able to do the search the same day. Some counties, like in Wayne County where Detroit is, it can take, anywhere from a couple weeks to a month to get back. And then once you get that back in the mail, now you're licensed and you can carry that firearm following the laws of carrying. So when they say we need expanded background checks, what more needs to be expanded? Because if you're already asking the local police, the state police, and the FBI about somebody, what other magical database or what other magical set of information is available out in the universe about you or I or anybody else that's going to be any more thorough than what's already in place? And that gets back to what I said earlier about additional laws about things. This is the law. This is the law in the state of Michigan. I know the laws in the state of Florida are very similar to Michigan, and most of the other states, give or take certain clauses and things, all these laws are extremely similar to one another. Mm-hmm. And the federal government also has the final say because there's federal gun law that trumps state law about people buying guns and carrying guns. So to people that, are in Washington, D.C. that say we need expanded gun background checks, explain to me what that is. What more expansion or what are they not looking into now?
See, this is what I think people need to understand more is the specificities of the laws that you just mentioned. People, including myself, are going to ask you questions like, well, what about the main shooters like the Dylan Roofs and the guy at the Sandy Hook and the guy just recently in El Paso, Texas? Why did they sink through the gaps of the sound policy that you just articulated, John? And I don't want to get into it now. We need something to look forward to for next week, don't we?
Well, always,
you know. But it's an interesting conversation. I'm still not sold on what you're saying, John, but it's interesting to know, and I want, in the meantime, people who are watching, and including myself, we're going to look up those state laws with regard to background checks, because John seems to think that background checks is a propaganda term for something that is already happening.
It is.
And most people don't understand it.
I don't think it's already happening. It's already happening. I hate to say this because I don't want my my friends on the left to like think I'm an evil, rotten, vile human being.
I'm on the liberal. I'm not on the left. I'm liberal.
And I'm not a NRA member, but I am a nationally certified trainer.
No, I understand.
Yeah, so I know my shit, folks. And this information that I'm sharing with you, if you don't know this already, even if you hate guns, just verify what I'm saying. You don't have to take my word for it. Go to the stateofmichigan.gov and search firearm laws, and everything that I'm saying is spelled out right there.
Right.
And you can even go to the federal government and you can search their firearm laws. And the only question I'm posing is that just explain to me when you say you want expanded background checks, which I am not opposed to, right? But just tell me, and this is what none of them can do, tell me what the definition of that is, because if
what the stipulations
yeah, because
are,
if state, local, and federal law enforcement databases and arrest records are not thorough enough, what additional will we be looking at, or what additional needs to be added? And
right,
is it medical records that you have access to mental health records? Well, that might necessarily not be a bad thing. I'm not opposed to that. But nobody is saying that's what they're asking for. Just what does expanded background check mean? Please tell me that, because I think the background checks they do now are pretty expanded and thorough. There's no crystal ball. There's no like magical thing. Like, oh, let's plug into this cosmic machine that can read the future and read someone's mind. Oh, it's saying they're going to be nefarious in the future. Nope, we can't issue. That's the background check that the people that hate guns want to exist. Mm-hmm. But that's fantasy. It doesn't, folks. And right. You can't penalize 99% of people for the actions of 1% of people. You just can't.
Not all. Hashtag not all.
Hashtag not all.
So, all right, we got to move from this subject, guys, because we have a limited amount of time left, and my bladder can only expand so far. So, we had this tragedy. This was the starting point, which we were supposed to have today. This tragedy off the Southern California coast, the burning of the Conception scuba tour boat. Investigation is underway concerning the cause of the accident. They don't know if it's electrical or gas or how it happened. All we know is that there was this very sudden turn of events in terms of flammability. And the captain and 4 crew members, the only non-passengers, all jumped off in the nick of time and survived, and were unable to save the 34 people sleeping below deck. The circumstances that they mentioned as far as the people below deck's ability to get out, because the passage was all ablaze and on fire, and so far I think they have 20 bodies. That could have gone up since we've actually started the podcast, because the search is underway as we speak.
Wow.
And charges of criminal negligence are on the table with regard to these, with regard to this captain and 4 crew members.
Do they know how the fire started?
No, that's what I said. There's an investigation ensuing as to the cause, whether it's electrical. I'm sure it was accidental. Not sure, but I have a feeling it was an accidental. And the captain and 4 crew members who survived, they jumped off right in time. They didn't intend to just ditch the people and leave them.
Yeah.
But they did end up as the only survivors, and it does not look good for them at all.
Well, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, boats are very flammable things. I mean, on most bigger vessels, before you even start them, you have to let the blowers down in the bilge, the fuel bilge, run for 5-10 minutes to blow any possible potentiality for fuel vapor to have accumulated before you turn the key and get a spark, because it'll blow the boat up. That's, basic boating safety 101. When you're out in a vessel like that, I mean, most vessels, unless they're really, really big, I mean, most vessels only have one entrance down below. I mean, there's only one way in and one out for most vessels.
John, with regard to negligence, because I have to take a break for like 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yes.
Can you tell our viewers, as a Detroiter, about that flight that landed over...
Which one?
Many years ago, I think it was in the late 80s, and it landed over the in it was in Detroit, and it was a result of the captain's negligence.
Oh,
and
Flight 255.
Tell them about that. I'm going to be right back, guys.
Yeah,
this is a live podcast, and Call of Nature is. I'm going to have my own big flush.
He is only a mere mortal man. Yeah, don't forget the big flush.
And don't forget the big flush.
Don't
Here's
forget the
John.
big flush.
Here's John telling you
am.
more about negligence.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was, I believe, still, if not the worst aircraft disaster in U.S. history or the world. It's one of the top ones. You pulled your... okay, you fixed it. Okay, it was one of the worst ones. It was definitely negligence. What happened was the pilots, when they were getting ready to take off, they didn't do a thorough checking of the flight, flight checklist. And they forgot to put the flaps down on the plane. And when you don't put the flaps down on a plane of that size, there's nothing to give you the lift you need to lift that big, heavy craft off the ground. So when they took off, they gained speed, and they started to get a little wind shear, and they started to rise up, but then there was no lift. So basically all they did was catapult themselves down the runway at high speed to a point where they couldn't stop. So the plane came down almost immediately. It really didn't even rise very high into the air. It hit I believe a parking structure and some power lines and whatnot, and it came down right in a busy intersection, and everybody on board, unfortunately, was killed, except for one little girl who was just a couple years old at the time. And she somehow miraculously survived. But the crash scene was horrendous. It sprawled for, I don't know, if not a mile in all directions. It was just a terrible scene. And it was definitely, pilot error, which is something that, I think they corrected after that in their checklist procedures. But you would think it's the most basic thing, being a pilot, putting the flaps down before you take an aircraft off. I mean, even on flight simulator games, if you play and you don't put the flaps down, the plane will do the exact same thing in your flight simulator video game. The plane will crash. So it was, they don't know, exactly what caused it. Maybe the pilots were talking amongst one another. Sometimes when you do things, for work, and you do it day after day so many times, the most simplest things sometimes can slip your mind. So I'm imagining that's what happened. But in this boating accident off California, it's definitely extremely tragic. But growing up around boats, unless it's a big vessel like a yacht with multiple cabins, there's typically only one way in and out of the vessel. So if these people's accommodations or bunks or whatever on a scuba boat, I mean, most of the time they are down below deck, and maybe the captain and the other guys were probably sleeping on the upper part of the boat, which I think is also quite common. If a fire breaks out somewhere around, the doorway where you go down, I mean, it'd be nearly impossible to get out of the vessel. And, if you've never seen a boat go up in flames, which I'm hoping most of you never have, I mean, it's really a crazy thing, because boats and the material that they're made out of most of the time are extremely flammable, especially if they're fiberglass. And once they catch on fire, they burn so fast. So, if a fire did break out right where the doorway was, I mean, it would have spread so fast that the poor people down below would have never had a chance. And not only that, I mean, the smoke and the oxygen being sucked away by the flames, I mean, the people either would have died very quickly from lack of oxygen and smoke inhalation, or from the heat that was generated, whether the flames, reached them yet or not. So just a horrible thing.
Right. And I mean, hey, I'm back, guys. Sorry about the brief departure, but we are a live show here. And I'm not the only one who does that. Mm-mm. But thanks, John, for filling in for me in the meantime. But this event is interesting because I personally don't know that the captain and four crew members can be culpable for negligence only when it is ascertained that there was time for them to rescue the 34 people below deck, because it does look bad when you're the captain and the four crew members and you're the only people who survives. The people actually paid for this.
Yeah, but if it's
so-called
if it's
adventure.
if it's a typical scuba boat that I'm thinking of, which they're not like luxury liners with like cabins and stuff like that. Basically, you have a big lower area where there's probably some bunks where most of the people were just bunking.
Yeah.
And I bet you the captain and the crew guys that probably just slept on the upper deck where the upper cabin part is.
Right place, right time.
Yeah, and there probably wasn't even any beds there. I mean, most of those scuba boats, they just have like seating built into the sides, kind of like bench seating. So I would assume these guys probably were just crashed on the bench seating, just sleeping above deck, because it's probably more polite to let, the people all kind of congregate down below in the nicer area to sleep.
Right.
It's probably less noisy and all that stuff. So I'm assuming it was probably a very casual...
and a lot less easy to escape in the event of a rapidly ensuing fire and explosion.
But, when you're out to sea like that, especially if they're sleeping, I'm sure that, I'm not sure of anything. I don't know. I don't want to talk out of turn. I mean, if the engines were off and they were just anchored and sitting, then something would have had to be incendiary to start the fire. The fire just wouldn't start. There's a chance it could be, the electrical system, because, they do have batteries on them. Maybe the wires got hot if there was a frayed wire or a short. So that is a possibility. If the engines were running, same thing. Maybe one of the wires in the system got hot and started something. But if the boat was just sitting anchored, then you could look to negligence, whether somebody... lit a cigarette and was smoking when the crew guys was smoking. Maybe he thought he threw the cigarette overboard, but it hit the rail and bounced back, and he didn't know it. And, it started a fire against something else. If it was something like that, then you could look maybe at negligence. But, the one thing about tragedies or bad accidents when things like this happen is... the victims' families or whatnot are mortified, horrified. It's so awful, but it's human nature, and plus I think it's part of the closure and healing process is that you need something or someone, more specifically, to blame, and sometimes, unfortunately, in life, accidents just happen.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to ascertain whether it's somebody or someone. In the case of the Titanic, which any time a boat sinks, I'm inclined to talk about my obsession, which is the Titanic, one of many. But I mean, you had Bruce Ismay, the president of the White Star Line, pressuring the captain to accelerate speed. In the Grand Banks, which is off the coast of Canada, off the coast of Newfoundland. He was pressuring the captain to speed up, even though all the other ships in the area told him to speed down, to slow down, I should say. And they stopped their engines, and they said, no, fuck it, we're actually speeding up. So they hit the iceberg. They couldn't turn in fast enough time. The captain was trying to impress the corporate owners of the ship, and he went down with the ship, and the corporate owners of the ship got off. Bruce Ismay got off and lived, a relatively longer life. Didn't freeze to death in the North Atlantic. I think that the important thing for me with regard to this investigation is the interim of time that the scientific investigation will show. How much time did the captain and four crew members have to potentially save the lives of the people below deck? Did the fire and pandemonium erupt and spread as quickly as they said it did? Did they have an opportunity to save them? Because they are in a horrible situation.
Yeah.
All the crew members who were getting paid lived, and the people who were doing the paying, the young people, all of them died.
Yeah.
Horrible, gruesome deaths. Hopefully there was not a great period of consciousness before they actually perished.
Yeah.
It was just immediate death. Ideally, that's the best that we can hope for. But that is the tragedy off the Southern California coast with regard to the Conception Scuba Tour boat. And, you know, my hearts are out to all of the families that we just discussed. But in terms of fire on the political brand,
Yes.
across the ocean, again, fire and oceans, we have Boris Johnson, the PM of the UK. His second Brexit vote was met with a humiliating, uncompromising backlash. So the Parliament in the UK voted against the, quote, no deal Brexit, which is leaving the European Union on October 31st on Halloween, no matter what. This is an example, Boris Johnson is an example of the populist reversal that is synonymous with Donald Trump and with a lot of people all over the world, the elites against a certain leader because he is against the control, the status quo that they have right now. So, for example, the European Union, being all these countries being united, regardless of how good or bad it is for certain countries,
Sure.
is part of the elitist status quo. And Boris Johnson's opposing that in the same way that Trump is opposing that, in the same way that, in a bit, we're going to talk about the protesters in Hong Kong. They're opposing it too, in very interesting ways. Where are you on Brexit, John? We haven't talked about Brexit yet.
Well, I think the people spoke. I mean, the political leaders, I think, were caught with their knickers down, to be British. I'm sure when the Brexit vote happened, they didn't expect, you know, it to go the way that it did. And of course, they didn't. They were very, very shocked. But the people spoke, and they spoke in no uncertain terms. And it really is David versus Goliath, or, you know, people versus oligarchs, because the European Union specifically has really only benefited oligarchs and corporations. It hasn't benefited the countries of Europe. I mean, the countries of Europe individually were much stronger when they had their own currencies and microeconomies country to country than they are now. And some countries like Germany, you know, have done much better, you know, financially under the European Union than other countries, you know, that get left behind because, you know, that's the thing. Not everybody is equal, even though they're supposed to be, you know. But, you know, when you have something like the European Union, you get rid of everybody's currency, which has a real value based upon their gross domestic product and, you know, the industries in that country, and you replace it with a fiat currency like the euro. That only benefits big business people and big industry, because if you can control the cost of labor and the cost of currency, and you can get it all to a standard thing, that it's much easier to forecast your profit margins, your manufacturing. It's much easier to forecast what type of, you know, raw materials you need and what you need to pay for them to make the profit you want. It's definitely not good for labor. Labor wages go down. I mean, it's really a raw deal for everybody except the people that own everything. And, you know, in the case of, you know, Brexit, you know, the British government, like you said earlier, is corrupt, and maybe even more so corrupt than the U.S. system of government, you know, with, you know, special interest money and oligarch money and old money and whatnot. So the people that grease the politicians, that donate to the politicians' campaigns, that support the politicians are all beholden to them, not the people.
For sure.
So when the people finally do take a stand and rise up, it really puts the politicians in a catch-22, because on one hand, the voters said, oh, shit, we have to do this. But you got the money people behind the scene that rule the world going, don't you do this, you better find a way around this, or we're not only cutting you off, we're ruining your life, you're never going to work in this town again. You know, I'm sure there's tremendous pressure on these people in the British Parliament to, find some type of workaround to where we snow job the people to think they're getting what they want, but we still maintain power and control and keep things the same.
Well, that's what's going on right now in the UK, and that's why the populist movement, like Donald Trump speaking for non-political elite people, and Brexit are synonymous with this movement. And it's interesting that it's a phenomenon unique to the English-speaking world.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned how Germany's benefiting from it. I disagree. Germany is one of the situations where the outcome is the least beneficial as far as the EU goes, because they have to finance everybody. The countries that did the best under the European Union, and I was just there, are Eastern European countries, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovenia, all these different places are doing way better than they would have been without the EU. And then Germany, on the other hand, because of the EU and France, they have to finance Greece, they have to finance the countries that I just mentioned, and other places where they don't have strict, for example, in Greece, many years ago, everyone was talking about how they didn't have strict enough regulation on dead people. Mm-hmm. So the government was having to pay. But if you're in the EU, the government isn't just your little country of Greece, it's everybody in the European Union.
Yeah.
And with regard to Britain, I, as a Canadian, take, as you noted, it's a nice word, umbrage with what's going on. Why should somebody from Poland, and I went to a British grammar school, or high school as you would call it here in North America, and I got the grades. I could have gone to Cambridge or Oxford. It's just the amount of money that it would have cost for me to do that for my undergrad. I would rather invest it in my master's degree. But why did so many people in my class in the Czech Republic who were from Poland, Hungary, also Czech Republic, they got the grades just like I did, and they got in for free because they're EU. But I, a Commonwealth member, my ancestors were the first to fight with Great Britain during World War I and II, and I'm treated with scrutiny when I go to the border, let alone apply for a loan to study at Oxbridge.
Well,
why is that? Why? I'm not for or against. There's arguments against Brexit that I understand, but me personally, it pisses me off that I couldn't go to Oxford or Cambridge, even though I had the grades. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to spend the amount of money on my undergrad, and other people got to go just because they were from Europe.
Well, sounds like affirmative action here in the United States.
Not affirmative action for me. Not affirmative action for the people who deserve it. We're the ones who went to war.
Yeah. Well.
Germans can get into Oxbridge and go for free just because they're in the EU, and they fought against Britain in World War II. And I'm half German. My mother's German, by the way. Mm-hmm. Anybody who thinks I'm anti-anything better fuck off, because I am everything. I can be anti-everything whenever
all you
I
can
want.
be. Isn't that the slogan of the United States Army?
Be all you can be?
Yes, I think it is.
Arbeit macht frei. But, so...
No, I mean, the bottom line is the internet in the internet age has been the worst thing that ever happened to people in power. And I think that, I don't know how they got lazy and allowed the internet to actually become a thing. I think they've woke up and they're trying to stall or destroy blockchain before it gets any steam, because it'll be the next level of this. But
financing without monetization through the platform.
And same thing. There's no middleman, in a way that a lot of very, very wealthy industries have sprung up and people have made their money, is that they have become the middleman in an industry. They don't actually, do the work. They just are the go-between or the catalyst between two different entities, and they end up making profits both sides of the equation.
Right.
So, people are now in a day and age where they can not only communicate their feelings out to the world, but they can see other people that communicate them back, and movements can develop. And not only that, when you see, facts and news and things like corruption be exposed in front of your eyes in a way that you would have never been able to see before, even 15, 20 years ago, because the, ready, in-your-face, instant access to news and information, it can change things dramatically. And, the people have spoke. In America, people spoke and they voted for Donald Trump. And they didn't necessarily love him or want him to be president. They just were like, fuck off, everybody in government. All of you people, fuck off.
Yeah, it's a populist movement.
Yeah, a populist. He's a loose cannon. It's like, I used to watch Sesame Street as a kid. It's a program we had in America with little puppets.
I've never heard of it.
Oh, yes, the Muppets. And there used to be this little skit called, with the puppets, goes, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things do not belong. And it's like Donald Trump. Donald Trump could have been Satan himself, but he wasn't a Republican or a Democrat in the standard terms that politicians are viewed in the States. So he was almost like the obvious choice for people that weren't married to the death to their political party or ideology. And I think the same thing is happening in Britain. People are so sick of everything that they've been seeing, and I mean, the bickering going on in their own parliament and government is just as bad or worse than the U.S. government and the scandals and everything. And I think the people have had enough.
Right. It's just more beautifully articulated.
That's all.
And I mean, again, we talked about how it'll be interesting for us who criticize the liberal media, not only criticize them, but say that Trump should praise them because of the fact that they are the sole source of his re-election in a year from November.
Yeah,
we'll be able to talk about that. But even sooner than that, John, the reason I brought up Boris Johnson's second Brexit vote and his rejection in Parliament is that by October 31st on Halloween, and we're having a party here. We should probably do a special Halloween podcast.
Yeah, we could.
Blood sacrifice and
that'd be good.
offerings to Satan and so on. But on that night, we will also know if Johnson was successful in the Brexit, no deal Brexit endeavor.
You know what? I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know what all the wrangling is. The wrangling is that, like I said, the politicians that are in the middle between the people and the people in power, they're trying to find a way to skate around the people's wishes. That's all they're doing. It's maneuvering and stall tactics. But the people spoke, and they need to do what the people wanted. And the people in Britain have held steadfast to their desire. They haven't changed their mind. They want it to happen, and they need to do it.
And Parliament is a different story than the people, too. So we'll keep everyone posted on October 31st on Halloween. I want to know what's going on. You can hold us accountable to have an answer for you guys. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, speaking about the people versus the government, we got 1/5 yesterday of the Hong Kong protesters' demands have been acquiesced. So, do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I know they're protesting over in Hong Kong.
I knew that too, and I think most people know that there's protests, but why are they protesting? What are their terms? What are their demands? What do they want?
They're mad.
So the 5 demands of the protesters, since they always have to narrow it down. 1, withdrawal of the extradition bill. Do you know what the extradition bill is, John?
That's where if they speak up against China, they can be extradited to China.
They can be taken to China from Hong Kong and charged for exercising what we in this part of the world call freedom of speech, which is not something to be taken for granted in that part of the world.
The Chinese are not going to give them that.
So the reason that they're entitled to that, though, is because of the China-Britain Treaty of 1997, which protects Hong Kong's handover process from China with its own slightly separate constitution, with its own stipulations that last until the year 2047. The position of the protesters and myself is that China, and Beijing particularly, is deviating and obstructing that treaty. So their 5 demands are: 1, the withdrawal of the extradition bill, which is what we just mentioned, the ability to take Hong Kong protesters and charge them by Beijing standards in Beijing, and who knows what happens to them after that. It's very Orwellian there. Mm-hmm. Then there's the resignation of Chief Executive Carrie Lam, who is the lady who instituted that treaty, and is looked at as a puppet of the communist Beijing totalitarianism. Third, the government removal of the term riots in public discourse when they're actually describing protesters.
Mm-hmm.
So protesters, not rioters. They're not crazy. They have a point. Full transparency of police activity. Number 4. Honest, reasonable thing. It's Orwellian right now. Who knows where the police are taking you or if you'll ever be seen again. And the last point is the unconditional release of all protesters hitherto arrested. Yesterday, Carrie Lam withdrew the Extradition Act. Some people say too little, too late. She's done one of the 5. The second of the 5, which is her resignation, I doubt is going to happen anytime soon. So, we have protesters over here. We have people bitching about Pocahontas costumes. We have people bitching about Robert E. Lee, who, again, yeah, he was a traitor, but the people who were breaking down that statue in Charleston, North Carolina, I'd like to see them against the real Robert E. Lee. They'd be decapitated and they would probably just succumb and be like, oh, we're Robert E. Lee supporters because they're pacifists and they're only being rebellious when it's safe and makes them look good. Virtue signaling, i.e.
Yes.
So where are you on Hong Kong?
Well, of course, I'm a supporter of human rights, and Hong Kong has been a integral part of the world economy for many, many years, long before China's economy grew. I mean, Hong Kong was like the first bastion in the world over there for free trade and low-cost manufacturing. When I was growing up, it was, you turn something over, a lot of times it didn't say made in China, it said made in Hong Kong.
Right.
And, as a kid, you're like, what the hell is Hong Kong? It was a place far away. But the thing with that whole problem is that there's a lot of cultural differences that I think people in the West don't fully understand and realize. There's certain mindsets and certain protocols and cultural things between the Chinese and people in Hong Kong that I don't think are going to, be ironed out. The differences are just too strong. People in Hong Kong have a very high level of distaste for the Chinese. They're not friendly with them. They believe that they're better than the Chinese. And, Hong Kong really isn't as significant economically as it used to be in the world. China his economy has blown up, and it's definitely way long ago overtaken, the economic, powerhouse that Hong Kong used to be. So not that Hong Kong is completely irrelevant, but, it's a small player on the world stage compared to how it used to be. And China knows this, so they really don't have a lot of bargaining power. And the Chinese are also well aware of, how people in Hong Kong have a disdain for them. And the Chinese have an equal disdain for the people in Hong Kong. So, it's like, once you lose your power and your bargaining chips, what do you really, where is the motivation of China to give them anything they want? I mean, China is definitely not the champion of human rights in the world, especially in that region of the world.
Well, there is the China-Britain Treaty of 1997. So they are legally, by international law, obliged to give them this handover period of time that lasts until 2047 to have their own sort of free laws. Like it's like Russia under Lenin, they had a Bolshevik revolution and they were like, fuck it. Like, we need to have a new economic policy that is friendly to small businesses. Hong Kong needed to have that. Now that China has its economic might, they're sort of in a ham-handed way, they're going against those laws. And what's interesting to me is that the West is not acting against it. Also, I mean, people in my age group think that Chinese communism is brilliant. They don't give a fuck about show trials or forced confessions and whatever. Everybody's just supposed to agree with them. Well, the fact that and you have people protesting against Donald Trump here, what the fuck are they protesting? Where are their 5 points? I find these protesters in Hong Kong as an exemplums for how young people should be when questioning authoritarian and totalitarian governments.
Yeah, but you got a bunch of snowflakes in America, and
beyond snowflakes, they're for the government that's oppressive and that Donald Trump is trying to fight. Donald Trump isn't a bully; he's fighting a bully government.
Yeah, well,
and the wimps and the whelps over here are saying, oh, yeah, fuck Trump and China. They're not all completely wrong. I read a lot of Noam Chomsky. Fuck you, man. Trump is the anti-bully. He's a bully, but he's an anti-bully. And to think that China is some great country, they have show trials. It's 1984. It's George Orwell realized. People talk about how Jules Verne was the greatest writer who predicted things. George Orwell's better. George Orwell is superior to Jules Verne in terms of predictability.
Way superior. I mean, that's sadly, we've talked about this on the podcast many times, is, the American public as a whole, especially the younger generation, maybe through no fault of their own because they've been through the educational system that we've given them, are extremely ignorant to things outside of their local towns, their local communities, aka the rest of the big world. Because of any of those kids that are protesting or standing in line and saying that China is a great place, if they had to go live in that system for a month, they definitely would change their tune. You and I both know that. Anybody that studies foreign policy or that studies history knows that, but unfortunately, they don't know that.
I don't know if they would change their tune. There's also have a good record of human reaction, the history of human reactions to political phenomena, which is
true.
Not unbecoming, which are totally unbecoming.
That's true. You usually
they'll conform. They'll be like, well, so what if they killed that many people?
Yeah, they either protest and resist, or they conform and submit. One or the other.
The people here would never really protest against something real.
No,
if something really worth protesting came to North America, the young people, the hipsters, they'd all be a part of it. They'd be the first people to be Nazis. They'd be the first. It's just like hipsters. It's just, you told me about hipsters when you were in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, we hate Donald Trump, man. We're nonconformists. And it's like, then why do all of you fucking dress the same, have the same beard, have the same stupid glasses, and the same ideas?
Yeah.
You're the most conformist. It's a reverse age. It's a mirror age. You're a parody of yourself.
Yeah, there's no individual identity.
I would never want to be a hipster. And I love downtown Detroit. Yeah. But everyone talks about, there's so many young people in Detroit. They're all fucking dumb hipsters.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lack of individuality. I mean,
and they think that they're so unique. They think they're such individuals. They're so stupid, you know?
Well, you said it, I didn't.
I'm here to say it because they're in my age group, and those are the people I have to interact with.
Yeah, I mean, again, until you see firsthand or you travel somewhere and experience a different culture or a different form of government, or you experience a form of oppression. I mean, I actually got into a little online skirmish last night or the night before on Facebook because somebody on my friends list, they made a post about the origins and history of slavery and whatnot, and the brutal nature of slavery and who should be responsible. And somebody who's younger, that fits your description of the hipster thing, chimed in and was like, oh, no, man, slavery in these parts of the world, weren't as bad here. And, this slavery was much more, humane and this and that. So I fired back and I was like, when you start parsing which form of slavery was worse than the other one, then I really need to question your motivation for even responding to this thread. Because it's humane to incarcerate or make somebody do something against their will and hold them as a slave, whether you're whipping them 100 times a day or once a year. And guess what? Even in the most humane places where slavery may have happened throughout history, on any given day, any given Sunday, the wind could line up and the slave master could have had a bad day fought with the old lady, found out that the crops are all going to be wasted this year.
And they're at his mercy, and it doesn't matter what race, what context.
Exactly. So you know what the kid's response to me was? Instead of, coming back with some type of factual basis for what he said, or his thing was, you're a fucking idiot. People as dumb as you and this and that.
Yeah, because he doesn't know. He's angry.
Oh, God, I wanted to hit him over the head with it.
Don't know.
Oh.
That's how you win. You be calm, because he's the one who wants to hit you over the head because of how stupid he is.
My God.
So it's like I said to many people, I'm Germanic and Slavic. So does that mean I should be able to go to the municipality of Rome and be like, hey, Il Duce, give me some money because my ancestors in the year 180 AD were oppressed by Commodus and Marcus Aurelius during their campaigns in Germany, and many of them were enslaved, and the men were enslaved, the women were raped. So, and that was a long time ago. Well, why is that less legitimate than 150 years ago? How does chronology wash away culpability?
I'm Sicilian. I gotta be owed money by the Moors that invaded Sicily and, pilfered the villages and, raped our women and, did bad things to our
Hannibal,
culture.
Hasdrubal, the Carthaginians,
Yeah. So, So it's a ludicrous argument to start parsing what form of oppression is better or worse than another form of oppression.
Yeah.
If you have an oppressor, guess what? It's bad, and it's human decency standards it's wrong. I mean, it's against humanity. So because one's worse than the other. I mean, Vlad the Impaler stuck, iron rods up people's asses and stood them up and let you freaking impale yourself to death. Other people burned you at the stake. Other people put you in flogs. The people in the South whipped people and hung them from trees. I mean, all of them are terrible.
Yeah. But this hipster you were talking to couldn't handle the facts.
You
stupid.
Yeah, it
fuck you. Wherever you are, fuck you.
Yeah, I forget what his name was.
Don't say it.
He had a hipster name. It was like
Todd.
It was like Brad or Todd or something like that. But
Tyler.
Yeah, right. But as far as China goes, I mean, China does have that agreement, right? That law, that treaty that they signed. But, if we talk reality, I mean, it's not like anybody can, make China, can enforce that. I mean, what are you going to do to China? You're going to invade China? You're going to put sanctions on China? China owns everybody's debt. China makes everybody's shit.
All the more reason to invade them.
Kill
everybody who we owe money to.
Yeah, and they also have, 1.5 billion, 2 billion people there. Good luck. You need to be nice to China. As horrible and terrible as China is, they're a sleeping bear, and you don't want to poke the sleeping bear too hard, unfortunately. I'm glad I'm not someone that lives in Hong Kong, because I do feel for the people. They do have legitimate gripes, but half of their battle is they are also coming at a place from a cultural, racial, cultural standpoint to where they have a lot of animosity and bad will towards Chinese, and
because they're trying to oppress them. The Chinese are totalitarian communists, and Hong Kong doesn't want that.
Yeah,
so my empathy is with them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And my contempt is not only for the Chinese government, but for people over here who think that going to a protest at Berkeley University because of Milo Yiannopoulos makes them some kind of hero or noble person. No. Fuck them. Yeah. These protesters in Hong Kong are real people who are protesting against gag orders against their freedom of speech. Real protesters who have a lot to lose. If they get caught, they go into labor camps. Nobody hears from them for years until they're all buzz-headed and wide-eyed and sunk and emaciated, making a confession speech. We confess to having counter-revolutionary ideas.
Or they could be killed.
I was sick and egotistical in both mind and body. Since the days of our glorious revolution, I have always conspired against the greater good of the proletariat. No longer. Before I am shot, I only hope that you will accept my love for the people and for Chairman Mao. You know, and that's what's going on there. People over here have no idea
what
the fuck oppression really is.
No, they don't.
It's a great opportunity to talk about that. Nobody else is.
Yeah, absolutely.
John,
absolutely, yes.
on the last note, speaking of fucking fucked up people, let's talk about Woody Allen, Scarlett Johansson, the Me Too movement, and the cancel culture phenomenon.
Yeah.
So I guess Woody Allen, in addition to, you know, marrying his own stepdaughter, also molested his biological daughter, Dylan.
Ooh, what a nice guy.
And she seems to be persistent on the fact that he did that. Going into her room and making her suck his thumb. When I heard the word thumb, I was like,
God, you know what?
that's even worse than the dick.
You're right,
You know,
it
like
is.
if it was the dick, I'd be like, oh, but the fact that it's the thumb, it makes me,
And you know what? Because it's Woody
worse.
Allen, I can totally, in my mind, I can totally picture that scenario. And it's fucked up. Woody Allen is a creepy dude. I've thought he was a creepy dude my whole life, since I was a kid, from the first time I saw him on TV and the movies. I never liked his movies. I didn't get his humor as a younger kid. I haven't seen one of his movies in years. I have no desire. When it came out that he, you know, was getting divorced to marry or be with his freaking child.
stepdaughter.
That he, whatever, adopted or... And everybody was just okay with it. It was weird. It was bizarre. You know,
Right.
It was like, who is this Woody Allen in the world? Like, what type of real power does he have to where the news media at the time, which was semi-legit, didn't even call him out for that shit?
Well, he was called out.
A little,
He had a lot to answer
bit,
for.
a little bit. But, like, in this day and age, like if... Who's a good Republican? Like if Trey Gowdy did something like that, or who's a conservative actor? Are there any, or comedian?
They've all been kiboshed. So I guess what's his name from Casino?
How about if Sean Hannity?
I can't see Sean Hannity doing anything
I can't
inappropriate.
either. I can't either.
I mean, we had it with O'Reilly. You
Yeah.
had Eric Bowling.
Yeah, there you
You
go.
had Roger Ailes.
Yeah, but imagine if in what's his name?
Glenn Beck,
Not that guy. The one you just mentioned.
Hannity.
No, the other guy. I can't. Yeah, just his name is bouncing around my hair. And the tall guy that got thrown out, O'Reilly.
O'Reilly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if O'Reilly had, I mean, he basically got accused of being a womanizer on the set.
Many years.
Many years of that, and being, you know, mean and shitty about it. And,
Yeah.
which is horrible. But if it arose, like if he was called out for the same type of things that Woody Allen is being called out for and was being called out for, this man would have been run so far out of, you know, existence by now. It's not even funny.
He kind of was.
Yeah, but he's back.
He's got
back.
a podcast, but nobody knows how to find like, I'm sure the people watching, there's a minority of you who actually know
but he's
about his podcast
right,
and how to find it.
But he's still able to come back, you know, even if it's in a much smaller capacity. You know, if he'd done the things Woody Allen is being accused of, there would be no coming back for the guy.
Right.
And Woody Allen and people like Woody Allen and people, and this is one of the biggest beefs I have with the left side, is that, you know, some of the things that the left cries about, I actually sometimes agree with them and stuff, but they have a double standard where if you're on our team, if you're on the left team, you're a good leftist and we can't lose you off the team because we need every person we can get in this fight.
It wasn't like that with Kevin Spacey.
No, not so much.
You know?
But I mean, the verdict isn't out, and that situation isn't completely over yet either.
Yeah, Harvey Weinstein,
The same thing.
Al Franken.
Yeah,
They got off with their shit too, and they're all liberals.
they are. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
but you know, they're not constantly chastised, and they stuck up for him. They volunteered. Those people, at least in Al Franken's case, he voluntarily resigned after a speech which he was praised for, and he left holding his head high with love from everybody. There wasn't any disdain from the people.
Right.
If he hadn't resigned, he would have continued to get support.
Mm-hmm.
And if he really was innocent, why would he resign? Why not fight? If you have the evidence to clear yourself, why resign? And that goes for anybody, not just him or left or right or whatever. So, but Woody Allen's a freak, and I totally believe.
I like his movies. I'm not with you on the movies. I think he's a freak, but I like his movies.
Well,
Blue Jasmine, the sort of unspoken remake of Streetcar Named Desire. I liked it.
Yeah,
it's
but
a good movie.
If he did what they're accusing him of doing to his own stepdaughter,
and the scientists, the doctors, the rape kit people, they all say that it never happened to her.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Scarlett Johansson's defending him.
I wasn't there. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that his household is a very dysfunctional household.
The Woody Allen household.
Yeah,
can you call it that?
So it's definitely not without the realm of possibility that she could be lying about it for whatever reason, to get back at Dad, to get some money, to, she just hated her father a whole year. This is a way to get at him because you can't get at him any other way. I mean, that's all possible. I don't know. But Woody Allen is just such a creepy dude that if I had to bet, I'd bet with the girl. I wouldn't bet on Woody Allen.
Really?
Scot-free. No,
That's interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Because as far as the Me Too movement goes, it's usually the opposite.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, I agree with Woody Allen. And forget about him being an elitist, because I do personally believe that he got where he was out of merit. Annie Hall, Match Point, which had Scarlett Johansson in it. He's a good writer, he's a good director, and I think he's an interesting person. However, he's so unattractive.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really hear about him being in the public eye within that Hollywood sex-addled culture at a young age, when he was attractive and could get sex without money. Like it didn't matter.
Was there references with him being at somehow point in time with Epstein?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I've heard it, but everyone's talking about people being with Epstein right now. I don't want to get into speculation because that thing is still unfolding.
That's true.
But my thing is just with old people who attain success when they're not only, like, they've always been ugly, but they're older.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been doing what they've been doing, which seems like, whether it's business or art, screenwriting, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And their main motivation is, whatever, before I die, I'm going to get laid like a hot young frat boy is supposed to get laid, and whatever I do. And so that's what I think is happening with him. I'm distrusting of anybody who's old, rich, successful, and they attain that success later in life. So anyway, John, we had a great day today.
Yes.
Great conversation. Lot more to talk about. We're going to be having we've already had Peter Klamka on to discuss cryptocurrency at his club more. Bitcoin and the whole phenomenon of, well, if you were smart enough in 2008 to buy Bitcoin when it was $14 a coin, you would have paid $14 a coin. And now that it's $3,500 a coin, you'd be worth $3,500,000. So, for those losers like us who didn't actually end up doing that, come up and join the big flush. You have to hold your nose, bring a little pincer, because what we do here is we flush out the unnecessary stuff. Democrat, Republican, vomit, feces, urine, all of it. We flush until the water is clear.
Yes.
And there's no smell in the air of bullshit.
No smell in the air whatsoever.
John, good to see you today.
Good to see you too, buddy. We will see you next time. Have a good week, and everybody, you have a good week too. And don't miss an episode. You don't want to walk around with dirty water in the bowl, now, do you?
Definitely not. Have a good one, guys.
All right.